All right. Well, we have a fun episode for you today, especially if you're owner of multi-location practice, right? We know how hard it is to even manage one practice, but when you're juggling five or even 50, the complexity just goes through the roof. So today, me and Dimitri are going to be speaking on, kind of how marketing differs when it comes to multi-location practices and really what marketing channels are the most effective. So, real quick, why don't we just do some real short introductions? Dimitri, do you want to
Sure.
introduce yourself?
Sure, I'd love to. So my name is Dimitri. I'm the senior media buyer at Markedly Digital. I've been here for over a year now, and my background is I have over a decade of like digital marketing experience, and things really have changed over time. Especially when we talk about small businesses, what they could have done in the past versus what they have to do now. It's a completely different landscape.
It is. It's way more nuanced. It's way more complex. And by the way, my name's Dominique. I'm the CMO here at Marketly Digital. So let's get it going with the first question. From your perspective, why is marketing with a multi-location, different or more complex than just a single practice?
So it's a couple of things. If we get in the technical aspect of it, it's you if your locations are close to one another, it's figuring out how do you keep it separate when you're actually doing the marketing. So if that's in the Google account, basically how do things not overlap? You might have different doctors in different locations. So how do you push one doctor's personality, forward in this 2 mile radius, maybe 3 mile radius, and then another one in this 4 mile radius?
Right.
So that's one thing. The other aspect is, it, you might have different specials. And these, again, this is more on a technical side. You might have different specials. We have one client actually. They have, I want to say, 9 locations, if I'm not mistaken. And some of them are very close. So the one thing that what they leaned into is if a patient comes in from, a neighboring office one, they saw an ad for office two, but they show up to office one, they're able to service them.
Mm-hmm.
If DSOs, multi locations, they don't do that, that also creates another layer that you have to
Yeah.
overcome. And you and I have talked about that before. We've seen that happen.
Yeah, no, we have, and this is a quick tip for any ones who do have this, is if you're able to service across multiple locations, that will really help your lead flow. I've heard the calls when you have someone who calls up because people are very schedule oriented. So if I call one office and I say, "Hey, do you guys have a Friday afternoon available?" And they say, "No, sorry, but maybe our sister office does have that." I've seen that be able to book a lot more new patients versus when Dimitri was saying how like if they don't have any like internal connection, you're not able to kind of eat off of each other's leads. Um, and it is more complex. I know with one DSO that we serve, we launched two campaigns, and this DSO had the same brand. So different DSOs sometimes they have the same brand name, sometimes they don't. This one did have the same brand name. Very similar office. I think the doctors even went back and forth for this one, and they're in two towns right next to each other.
Hmm.
And we launched the same offer, same funnel, same landing page, same ads.
Yeah.
One crushed it for us.
Right.
ROI was crazy, and the other one completely tanked, and we had to pivot from it.
And that brings up another point. You have to know the demographic in the area.
Right.
So even the two different towns is kind of like, what is it? What's the income level? That's a big thing too, right? Because another thing for dentists, if they don't take certain insurances, or they say, we are getting a lot of phone calls, we are getting a lot of leads, but the people are not financially there. They can't afford certain services.
Yep.
So it's also playing to that, figuring out how do you market to that. That also impacts what special are you going to have? Are you going to have maybe different offers for different offices? So even though everything might be under one umbrella, you almost have to treat them like they're completely different businesses in some aspect, at least
Mhm.
in terms of setup. There's certain things that overlap, if it is one brand, like the example you brought up. But it's almost like they're completely autonomous.
Yeah. And so diving into kind of like the main point of this episode, what would you say are the most effective channels or the channels that DSOs should be thinking about when it comes to marketing?
I think right now in general, video is king. It used to be content is king. That was always the tagline. I think now video is king. We talk about this a lot. You have to have the doctors on board for it, but getting the personality out there,
Yep.
right? Um, this goes specifically too with DSOs because again, every office is slightly different. You have a slightly different demographic. They might be looking for slightly different things. If you're in a if you have an office, let's say that's close to different factories or like, Amazon, for example, right? Um, you might have people that they're just there to work,
Mhm.
right? Maybe it's people on a visa, for example, if you're by Microsoft, you know. So their whole thing is I just want to get in and get out. So even when you do the content, even when you do the video, it's, relating that message. If you're somewhere where it's more family oriented, it's talking about that. Um, as far as channels, I would say social media, TikTok is up in the air. As of today, we don't know. It looks like it's gone. But obviously something else always pops up. Give it 6 months. We'll let you know about the next thing, the next big thing
The
that you
next thing
gotta
is up.
do because this is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, but Facebook, Instagram, so like Meta, right? You always want to
Mhm.
lean into that. And that's where the video is really great. Um, you want to create that demand. YouTube is another amazing channel. We've been experimenting more with it. And the cool thing about YouTube is, I will caution you, you might look at the numbers and you're like, man, this is terrible ROI. Like, it's not doing anything. But the thing about YouTube, it's like a halo effect. So you might not see the impact of it directly as far as like, hey, I put $1 in, I got $2 out. But if you turn off YouTube, other things might,
Mhm.
start crumbling because it has this thing where it's like going back to omnipresent. People see you everywhere. Turn on YouTube, they see you. They go on social, they see you. You're everywhere. Um, and
That's
uh,
always a factor, and I mean, as marketers, it would be amazing if it was as simple the buyer's journey was as simple as someone sees the ads,
oh
clicks the ads, and then walks to the office.
man, my life will be
Right.
amazing. Yeah, but those days are gone.
Yeah, those days are gone, and video, it's a little bit harder to attribute,
Yeah.
but it does impact. You see it in the numbers, you see it in the bottom line. How about Google?
Yeah, Google is the biggest driver, right? So it's kind of like you look at social media, like social media. It's kind of you creating the demand for yourself. You're also, because there's so much video, you're bringing this awareness to yourself. Same thing with YouTube. Now, when we talk about Google search, this is where, hey, dentist near me. Hey, dentist that, does tooth extraction, emergency dental, dental implants. Now you're actually speaking to the people that are looking for a solution.
Right.
So Google is high intent. That's the big thing, right? If you kind of want to break them like that, Google is high intent. It's non-interruptive, so it means that I have a toothache right now. I'm in front of this laptop. I go on Google, dentist near me, and then I'm looking at their schedule. I'm
Right.
looking at their landing page. I'm looking at their offer, new patient offer. It's a great driver. Sometimes again, maybe the cost per lead is going to be a little bit higher, but you will likely get more qualified leads off of Google. Whereas with social, it's like you're going to get more volume. Not
Mhm.
everybody's going to be qualified. Some people are not going to be ready to make that commitment. They're not going to be ready to actually sign up and commit.
Right, and one question that we get is, what channel is gonna be better for a DSO? And I'd have 2 answers to that
Mm.
question. One is it really depends on the structure and the business strategy of the DSO. So like Demetria was saying, if you have video, if you have someone that can perform, video really only performs as good as the person who's
Oh,
behind the camera,
100%.
right? So if you are fighting tooth and nail to get your doctors to shoot a video, then you might want to lean more into Google, right? Where you don't have to
Yeah.
have as much content. If you have beautiful offices, you have, team members or doctors that are willing, and honestly, you can make this as part of the contract as a DSO. You can make, "Hey, we need help with the marketing," in terms of making sure those doctors are willing to shoot videos. Then Facebook is or YouTube or Instagram is gonna have more of an impact. What would you say to that?
No, 100%. the one caveat I will put, if the doctor is not willing to do video, maybe the office manager or somebody
Mhm.
who's very involved in the business, who's still like kind of the face of the business, who's there most times, maybe they'll do the video. But ultimately, we've seen most success when the doctor is on camera. They buy into it and they show their personality. If you've been listening to us and you've seen our content, Shannon always talks about is the personality, right? Is the buy-in. It's kind of like you have to show up. You got to be high energy.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I'm scared. I don't want to go to a dentist. I love you guys, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I love not having somebody dig in my mouth.
Needles in you.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like you gotta make the person feel comfortable, and it's more so not thinking about what ultimately you're trying to achieve, but also what is the other person trying to achieve. Like, how do I come across to them? And if you work with us, the big thing that we provide is we provide scripts. We've worked with DSOs especially too, because it's like again they're all a little bit different, and we
Right.
provide coaching if somebody's trying to shoot the video themselves. The cool thing is, I just want to add this in, you don't have to overcomplicate it. A little selfie video, like you have a little prompt on
Mhm.
the phone, you're good. It doesn't have to be, don't get overwhelmed by the
The
idea of
production.
video.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a crazy production.
It's true. And we've seen this literally. I mean, we have more than enough data to kind of back this
Yes.
that any day I'm gonna prefer something that's well produced for sure.
Yeah.
But like you said, selfie videos, honestly, they perform just as well,
Sometimes better
sometimes better.
because it's more personable.
Um, so for these locations, practices, and DSOs trying to decide, which marketing channels should we focus into video? Should we focus into Facebook or Meta or Google? Um, you know, how much budget should we try all of them? How much attention, energy do we really push the doctor? All these decisions. What's the biggest challenge that you see with them trying to make the right choice into where to allocate budget and put their focus?
Man, that's a great question. I think one, it's like if there's already a demand in your area for your services, it doesn't have to be very specific to your practice, but just there's a demand for dentists. I would always say, Google search, simply because we can at least gauge if there is demand. If we are driving the right clicks, you have a funnel built out, your website is looking good, you'll get calls, and it's kind of one of those. Okay, so now I also have to look at my front desk, how did they handle that? But video is amazing if you want to start growing, especially, right? So if you're looking at it and you're like, okay, well, I want my business to be, 2, 3x in, let's say, 2 years, a year, whatever it is for you. I want to continue expanding. Look into video because you can generate that demand, and that's really what you want. So allocation, I would say maybe 70-30, 70 towards Google search. Start off there, 30 to video, start testing things out, because also it takes time to figure out what videos connect, what
Mhm.
do people care about in that area.
Yeah.
And what I will say is sit down, sit down as a team and figure out the avatar. Who actually comes into the office? Who actually do we service the most? What do these people care about? Like it's a kind of a
Mhm.
exercise you have to go through, but with every single, practice in the umbrella. Because if you kind of say, well, all of our patients are like this, and your offices are scattered around the state or maybe even between two states, you kind of don't know. Because again, like we said, somebody who comes in and they're 30 years old and they live next to a Microsoft, they work in Microsoft as an IT, they're going to be somebody very different who's going to be somewhere in, in a house. They have a wife, kids, or a husband and kids. And it's like the decision makers are different. If it's a woman, she's deciding for the whole household. A man might, if he's single again in his 30s, he's going to decide for himself. So that process is different too.
Mhm. No, that you brought up some good points and kind of the challenges with that. I would say what me and you have both seen is probably the number one challenge is tracking.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And because you're trying to make these decisions and you want them to be data-driven decisions, right? But getting clean data can be difficult for one practice alone,
Yeah.
let alone when you're managing 10, 20, 30 practices, to be able to make those decisions of, who are the target audiences, what ads
Yeah.
are driving the most patient volume. Yeah, tracking in terms of actual ROI can be a big challenge. And there are platforms that support that. We have different ways of helping doctors with that, but making data-driven decisions and choosing the right platform is and the right channel, I think, is really important.
No, that's a great point. Just to add to that, because I even mentioned that in the beginning from a technical standpoint, right? So if you have multiple locations, like let's say you're setting up a Google account, it's a lot easier to have one Google account per location. So one from, tracking billing, I'm sure billing, it might be tied all together, but realistically it's probably not. But two, going back to your point, is tracking because even you're setting up conversions, essentially like, what are the actions that you're tracking? Is it, calls? Is it people filling out the form? Once you start setting up more than one account or more than one practice in a single account, you have to make sure you name everything correct, the right code goes in the right place, and then it can get overwhelming. And then
Mhm.
the problem is if you don't do it correctly the first time, it can be a headache to figure out like how do I clean it up. So if you do
Right.
everything individually, like per account, and again, this is one of those things like it's more on a technical side, but it's important. Same thing with Facebook. Sometimes breaking it up, and that's where tracking also ends up working better.
Yeah, it has a big impact. Um, and what would you say about SEO? Where do you think SEO kind of fits into the big picture strategy?
No, that's a great question. So I'm not the SEO, person, the mind. But I will
But
say,
you are a Google mind.
listen,
You know
I'm a Google mind when somebody sees it and says sponsored. That's my thing. When somebody just doesn't see that, I'm okay. But SEO is like it's kind of like they work off of one another, right? SEO takes a while. So, SEO might be a year to really build you up and really
Mhm.
take over, dominate the area. At the end of the day, you want to take over. Google gets you there a little quicker because right away you're just paying for people to see your ad at the top. SEO, it says growth. But once you have both of them, firing, now all of a sudden somebody looks up dentist near me, you might pop up, organically your site comes up, or somebody sees your ad. So it's kind of like a two-headed monster. And then if we start getting into other channels, oh, you're also on Facebook. Oh, like I saw you on my Instagram.
Right.
Oh, I saw you on YouTube. It's amazing what that does.
Yeah.
And, we had this is a little bit of a side note, but like one great example, Dr. Saba, right? He always said he's like, the fact that my face is everywhere on video, when a patient comes in, it's a lot easier to connect with them quickly. And
Mhm.
then, explain the service and they trust me. Because humans we operate on the more we see somebody, the more we begin
Right.
to
Nope, I
develop
can
trust.
trust them, yeah.
Yeah, even if it's not in person. But yeah, so SEO is still you still need it.
Yeah, you definitely need it, and, I don't do SEO either on a day-to-day basis, but, working with Kelsey, our director of that, for a while, what we've picked up is how it fits into multi-location specifically really depends on your brand strategy or how your business is structured. In terms of branding, so some DSOs are focused on, they have the same name
Yeah.
across the board. Other ones have, maybe 5 this name, 5 another name, and then others keep their original name and website that they purchased,
Mhm.
that practice. So that makes a big impact. If you're doing the separate, brands, then you're gonna need separate websites
Yeah.
for each practice, which is gonna make your SEO a little bit more complex. But probably our favorite strategy for SEO for multi-location is to focus on the brand. And there's really cool tools that you can use like dynamic keyword insertion, dynamic landing page insertion, where you can write one page for service and it will connect to all locations.
Yeah.
Right. And so that in that way, you can put kind of all your SEO juice behind the brand itself with having location pages. So, you know, the brand might be, Blue Dental, right? But then you have a location for this for each for each practice that
Mhm.
have different kind of those targeted keywords for those specific locations, and that, that's all kind of on the back end, but it's probably the best strategy that we've seen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even to add to that, paid ads, right? So if we want to have something as simple as dentist near me, it's always good to have a branded campaign at the same time, right? So
Mhm.
if there is a office that's called Blue Dental and you're in that area, you also want to bid on those keywords and have ads that speak to your brand. Because sometimes, maybe they'll land on your landing page or on your website, but the person is not ready. They want more research somehow. So, you want to be able to also pop up in the beginning at the top if your SEO is still getting built out, because sometimes you don't come up for your name,
Yeah.
especially if it's kind of a common name for a business. All of a sudden somebody else is, coming up.
No, that's a good point. What would you say we talked a little bit about creating content, right? Creating video
Yeah.
content. How would you say that a multi-location practice can create that content that resonates while maintaining kind of the brand consistency across this entire region?
It's a great question. I think that also depends on the marketing director at that DSO,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like they're in charge of the brand, so their vision has to resonate in that. One thing that I would say, sometimes it's nothing like super complicated. It can be small things, right? So, if your brand, for example, overall, your brand is like, we're family dentistry. Doesn't matter which office you go to. It's having, kids' toys somewhere in the shot. It's nothing complicated. You don't actually have to say like, "Oh yeah, we see kids," but it's like, but if you have a stuffed animal somewhere, a mom or a father, they're gonna see it. They're gonna like, "Oh, okay, cool. I can
Right.
bring my
Your
kids."
brain will subconsciously connect that.
Exactly. So there's like a lot of small things. Like I love the science of marketing, kind of like the psychology of it, and it's always answering the question why. So your brand, why is your brand important? What is your brand trying to accomplish? Um, and even though the services might be different, there's probably something overall that's kind of like overarching across the brand that you can put into it. It's not just about the logo. The logo, the colors, they're important, but there's usually some idea that you're trying to get
Mhm.
across, and that's what you want to do.
Yeah, so clarifying that idea while still bringing in enough individuality from each practice, right? Whether it's a doctor, a team member, even local signage,
Yeah.
and factoring in that unique audience for that area. Like we talked about in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Income levels, interest levels. Are they close to a major corporation? Different things like that I'll factor in.
Listen, you can make an ad saying, there's a town square somewhere and it's everybody knows it by some name, right?
Mhm,
Um, John Smith is town square, right? You can literally say, "Hey, we're 2 minutes away from John Smith Town Square.
mhm.
We're around the block." Because the people, if they're local, now it's
They'll
like,
know it.
"Oh, I know where
Yeah.
this is at." And now all of a sudden you're part of a community.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you want to be a superstar in your community. So you want to get that 5-mile radius where it's like, this is I own dentistry in this 5-mile radius. Then you
Mhm.
expand, you know.
Would you say there's any, common mistakes that DSOs make, whether it's kind of a smaller owned or, like you said, the marketing manager that's in there? Any mistake when they're trying to manage all these campaigns, different channels across multiple locations?
Yeah, I so the first thing on the technical side is kind of combining everything. So your metrics are muddy
Yes.
because I've seen that and it's such a headache to get, to untangle that. Part of it is like, for example, let's go back to Google running multiple locations out of Google. Um, if your conversions and everything is not set up right the first time, your data is already bad. So now the platform itself, the algorithm, the AI is optimizing incorrectly.
Mhm.
So let's say you are getting some results and you see that people are coming from Google, but now you bring in maybe somebody who's like, or maybe it's you yourself. You're like, oh man, like I messed up. Let me fix this. Once you start fixing it, you're gonna have a dip. You're gonna have a month where performance is gonna
Yeah.
be bad. And that might mean you lose a lot of patience, or not lose patience, but
New
like, yeah,
patients.
patients don't come in. You have to be prepared for that. And I have seen that happen where, there's a Google account. I'll come in and I'm like, hey, this is a little off. Like, just so you know, we'll keep running this, but we're going to start building everything out correctly. Um, I think that's a big one. I think that's
Mhm.
probably the number one thing that I will say. And two, just You mentioned it earlier. It still goes back to tracking. It still goes back to metrics, not knowing your numbers sometimes too.
Mhm.
If you're looking at everything as a whole, like holistic view, but you don't break it down by location.
By location, right?
Yeah.
And it's a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance of, also not letting each individual practice dictate too much the strategy.
Right.
You have to kind of maintain what strategy, what offers, if you're going to be using videos, but then at the same time still including them enough, right? So that it
Right.
becomes personalized. So it is a delicate balance, but yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, you wanna use all marketing channels,
Mm-hmm.
and just, like you said, make data-driven decisions in terms of which one you wanna focus the budget allocation,
Yeah.
based off of data and also based off of the capabilities and assets of each
Yeah, and
location, right?
goals, right?
Mm,
Goals. Maybe
right.
maybe there's a practice that it's like it's amazing. It's skyrocketing, but then there's one struggling, and you really want to, next 6 months, I want to get this one to catch up. So
Yeah.
goals are important.
No, that's awesome. That's some really good data. Thanks for that,
Right?
Dimitri. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you're able to get some value from that. We have loads of other content in terms of helping established practices, multi-location practices grow when it comes to their marketing, internal, external. So subscribe, smash that subscribe button, and,
Right
and
there.
check out what else we got. And if you want to reach out to us to chat, we're always happy to chat.
Absolutely.